Hello everybody, this is David. Welcome back to my channel. This video is the next in our series, a survey of the Bible, and we're currently in the book of Deuteronomy, and we've got to the 10th video in our series on the book of Deuteronomy. So we're going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 20 and 21, both those chapters. So if you're ready, let's continue. So God knew that the people of Israel would be fighting many other nations in the future of the nation of Israel. Now, as a result, God gave them many instructions about what they were to do when they went to war with another city or another nation. God told them that there were certain men that should not go and fight. Instead, there were reasons why those men were not to fight at that time. Then God told them how they were to fight against other cities. In addition, God told the people of Israel what they were to do with the people they captured. So as we go through this video, we'll see why God said certain people shouldn't go to war, explain how God said the people were to fight. We'll see what was to be done when a man was found dead in a field, and we'll see what God said about a disobedient son. So there's a lot to look at in this video. So the Lord knew that the people of Israel would be fighting against great and powerful enemies. These people would have horses and chariots. However, the people of Israel were not to be afraid of these enemies. Instead, they were to remember how the Lord had brought them out of the land of Egypt. Now, before the fight began, the priest was to speak to the armies of Israel. The priest was to encourage them not to be afraid of their enemies. The priest was to remind the people that the Lord would fight for them, and the Lord would fight against their enemies, so that the people were to trust in the Lord for victory. Let's have a look at Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 1 to 9. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. So it shall be when you are on the verge of battle that the priest shall approach and speak to the people. And he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are on the verge of battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint. Do not be afraid, and do not tremble or be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. Then the officers shall speak to the people, saying, What man is there who has built a new house and has not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. Also, what man is there who has planted a vineyard and has not eaten of it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man eat of it. And what man is there who is betrothed to a woman and has not married her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man marry her. The officers shall speak further to the people and say, What man is there who is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return to his house, lest the heart of his brethren faint like his heart. And so it shall be, when the officers have finished speaking to the people, that they shall make captains of the armies to lead the people. Interesting, don't you think? So, God said that there were several groups of people who were not to go out with the army when Israel went to fight against another nation. Who were they? Firstly, it was that man that had built a new house but had not dedicated his house or moved into it. He was not to go to war. His house was to be dedicated first before he went to war. Now, also a man that had planted a vineyard and had not eaten any of the fruit of that was not to go and fight. He was to enjoy the fruit of his vineyard before he went to fight. Otherwise, if he was killed in battle, he might be killed in battle before he had eaten any of the the grapes from that vineyard. Now God was the one who established the first marriage when he brought Adam and Eve together in the Garden of Eden. For this reason, God has always placed a very high value on marriage. God said that a man that was engaged was not to go and fight until he had married the woman. In Deuteronomy chapter 24, we will learn that he was not to go to fight until he had been married for an entire year. God wanted a couple that was just getting married to have time to get their home strongly established. Now, as a result, God did not want anything to hinder the establishment of the home. So we see that marriage and family life is very, very important to God. Also, the Lord only wanted men to go into battle that had their trust in him. Those men that did not have their trust in the Lord for strength would be fearful. Now, as a result, God said that those who were fearful and afraid were also to go home instead of going to the battle. Those who were in fear because they trusted in their own strength might discourage the other soldiers so that even more soldiers became fearful. Now, we can learn an important lesson from the fearful and the faint-hearted. Today, God is looking for Christians that are depending on him for strength. God knows that Christians that are depending on his strength will be able to fight against the powers of Satan, the world as well. Those who are depending on their own strength will be controlled by fear. God also told the people of Israel that they were to give a city of choice when they went to fight against that city. They were to give that city a choice, should I say. Israel was to send messengers to the city and ask the leaders of the city if they would like to surrender. Now, in this way, the enemies were always given a choice. If the city surrendered, the people of the city were to become the servants of the people of Israel. However, if the city refused to surrender, then the army of Israel was to come and fight against that city. The army was to surround the city and fight against it until it was captured. And we'll read this. We're going to read now Deuteronomy 20 from verse 10. We're going to carry on reading. When you go near a city to fight against it, then proclaim an offer of peace to it. And it shall be that if they accept your offer of peace and open to you, then all the people who are found in it shall be placed under tribute to you and serve you. Now, if that city will not make peace with you, but war against you, then you shall besiege it. And when the Lord your God delivers it into your hands, you shall strike every male in it with the edge of the sword. But the women, the little ones, the livestock, and all that is in the city, all its spoil you shall plunder for yourself, and you shall eat the enemy's plunder, which the Lord your God gives you. Thus you shall do to all the cities which are very far from you, which are not the cities of these nations. But of the cities of these peoples which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, you shall let nothing that breathes remain alive, but you shall utterly destroy them, the Hittite and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite, just as the Lord your God has commanded you, lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations which they have done for their gods, and you sin against the Lord your God. When you besiege a city for a long time while making war against it to take it, you shall not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. If you can eat of them, do not cut them down to use in the siege, for the tree of the field is man's food. Only the trees which you know are not trees for food you may destroy and cut down, to build siege works against the city that makes war with you until it is subdued. So all of the men of the city were to be killed if that city chose to fight against Israel. However, the people of Israel could take the women, the children, the cattle, and the possessions of that city as a reward for themselves. Then God went on to explain that the people were only to do this to cities that were far from them. They were not to do the same to the cities that were in their own land. God said that they were not to allow anyone to live in the cities in their own land. God said that the people in the land of Canaan were to be completely destroyed because of their sin. Israel was actually carrying out the judgment of God for their sin on those nations that lived in the land of Canaan. So God knew that the people of Israel would soon begin to follow the sinful practices of the people of the land if any of the people of Canaan were allowed to live. When the people of Israel fought against a city, they were not to cut any of the fruit trees to use to build a tower from which to fight. The fruit trees helped to keep people alive. For this reason, they were only to use those trees that produced no fruit to build a tower. That way, there would be food for the people of Israel that moved into the area after Israel captured the city. So God knew that after the people reached the land of promise, that there would be times when a person would be killed and no one would know who had killed that person. Since the people would not know who was guilty of the murder, they could not shed the blood of the murderer. So for this reason, the closest city to the site of the murder was to offer a sacrifice to make atonement. The leaders of the people were to measure and find what city was the closest city to the place where the dead person was lying. Then the men of the closest city were to bring a sacrifice. And we can read Deuteronomy chapter 21 verse 1 to 9, and we'll see what kind of animal the people of the city were to bring as a sacrifice. Okay, chapter 21 verse 1. If anyone is found slain, lying in the field in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess, and it is not known who killed him, then your elders and your judges shall go out and measure the distance from the slain man to the surrounding cities. And it shall be that the elders of the city nearest to the slain man will take a heifer which has not been worked and which is not pulled with a yoke. The elders of that city shall bring the heifer down to a valley with flowing water, which is neither ploughed nor sown, and they shall break the heifer's neck there in the valley. Then the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister to him and to bless in the name of the Lord. By their word, every controversy and every assault shall be settled, and all the elders of that city nearest to the slain man shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the valley. Then they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, nor have our eyes seen it. Provide atonement, O Lord, for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, and do not lay innocent blood to the charge of your people of Israel. An atonement shall be provided on their behalf for the blood. So you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from among you when you do what is right in the sight of the Lord. So the heifer for the atonement was to be a heifer that had never done any work. The leaders of the city were to bring the heifer to a valley where no one had planted any crops. There they were to cut off the head of the heifer. The priests were to come near and listen to the words of the elders as the elders followed the instructions of the Lord. The elders of the city that were close relatives of the dead man were to wash their hands over the dead body of the heifer. This was to show that they were not guilty, and also to show that they did not know who was guilty of the killing of the dead person. So these men were to testify that they were innocent. Then they were to ask God to show his love and mercy to the people of that city. They were to pray that God would not hold this sin against the people of Israel. God said that he would not condemn the people if the elders of the city would offer a sacrifice. Instead, God would forgive the people. The innocent blood would be removed from the people. This would be true because the people had done right in the sight of God. They had been obedient and offered the sacrifice that God required. Now, we saw that the people of Israel were allowed to keep the women and children as servants when they'd won a victory over a foreign city. Now, because of the beauty of some of these foreign women, God knew that some of the men of Israel would decide to marry some of these foreign women. Now, as a result, God told the men of Israel what to do before they married a foreign woman. They were to shave her hair and trim her nails and then have a time of mourning. Let her have a time of mourning for her parents for a month. Then the man could take the woman as his wife. We're going to look at chapter 21, verses 10 to 23, and we'll see what the man was not allowed to do if he decided he didn't like the woman. And we'll see why they were to allow her to have a time of mourning for her parents. And we'll see, I'm going to ask you why you think, well, after we read this, why do you think that God wanted to make certain that the foreign women were treated with respect and concern was shown for their feelings? So let's continue. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 10. When you go out to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hand, and you take them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and desire her, and would take her for your wife, then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails. She shall put off the clothes of her captivity, remain in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a full month. After that you may go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. And it shall be, if you have no delight in her, then you shall set her free. But you certainly shall not sell her for money. You shall not treat her brutally, because you have humbled her. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have both borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, and if the firstborn son is of her who is unloved, then it shall be on the day he bequeaths his possessions to his sons that he must not bestow firstborn status on the son of the loved wife in preference to the son of the unloved, the true firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. Now, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have chastened him, will not heed them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city, and they shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall put away the evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Now, if a man has committed a sin deserving of death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall surely bury him that day, so that you do not defile the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, for he who is hanged is cursed of God. So if a man married a slave, he was required to give her freedom if he divorced her. He could not sell her to someone else. In this way, her rights were also protected. If a man had two wives, he was required to give the double portion to the son that was born first, even if that son was not the son of his favourite wife. Even if the man had come to the point of hating the wife of the oldest son, that man was still to give the double portion to him. That was the right of the firstborn. Nothing that happened could change that right. Now, if a son refused to listen to his parents, even when the parents disciplined him, the parents were to take that son to the rulers that sat at the gate of the city. They were to tell these elders that their son was stubborn and rebellious. They were to tell how he refused to even listen to his parents. They were to say that he would not obey them. Then the elders of the city were to take the young man outside of the city and stone him with stones. Here we see that God wanted the children of the families of Israel to obey their parents. God required a very stiff punishment for any children that refused to obey their parents. God said that all of the children in the land of Israel would hear what had happened. This would cause them to learn to fear and respect their parents if they heard that a disobedient son was put to death. Then God went on to talk about a man that was put to death by hanging. When a man was killed by hanging, the body of that man was not to remain hanging from that tree during the night. Instead, that man was to be buried the same day that he was hung. God said that any person that was hung on a tree was cursed by God. This is why Christ was hung on a cross. He became a curse for us so that we might receive the righteousness of God through him. Why do you think that Jesus Christ was willing to become a curse for us in order to pay for our sin? He became a curse for me, for my sin. He became a curse for you, for your sin. Interesting question. Why did Jesus become a curse for us? So he could pay the penalty for our waywardness, our rebellion against God. Anyway, I want to thank you for joining me in this video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.